This is a Geek Leader podcast, and I'm your host, John Rauda. This show is all about helping us grow as leaders, become better technologists, and improve our lives both at work and at home. I hope you enjoy the show and learn a lot. Hello, world, and welcome to episode 191 of Geek Leader Podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda, and today's episode is sponsored by Live at Manning's Graph Data Science Conference. Now, if you're anything like me, a visual representation of data is very important, and nothing does it better than graphs. So please tune in to the Live at Manning Graph Data Science Conference this February 16th. That's coming up, guys. So February 16th to hear talks from data scientists explaining how, where, and why you should be using graph data to your advantage. You can register free by going to ageekleader.com/graph. Again, that's ageekleader.com/graph. And also on any of the Manning conference and events products, you can get a discount by using TCGraph21 to get 35% off. So check that out as well. You can find more information about that at ageekleader.com/graph. Thanks again, and don't forget to check out this Live at Manning Graph Data Science Conference. All right, Geek Leaders. Today on the show, I've got Becky Morrison, and she is a UC Berkeley certified executive coach with a passion for helping people live happy and priority-aligned lives. And right now, with all that's going on with COVID, that's a really important thing that we need to be focusing on. She also had a successful career in financial services and worked with law firms as well. And with all that being said, let's just get into talking to Becky. And Becky, tell us a little bit about kind of what you're doing today, how you got to where you are, and what's the significance of the things that you're working on.
Sure. So, like you said, I'm a UC Berkeley certified executive coach. I got to this place through sort of a winding 2-decade plus career that took me through. I started in operations and systems and then went to law school, litigated for a handful of time, and then spent about 10 years in law firm administration, really focused on legal technology stuff. And then from there went into finance. And so it's like this kind of winding path of trying to find my own happy and trying to get really clear on what mattered to me in various seasons of my life. And landed here about 2 years ago, started my own coaching and consulting practice because I discovered what really, really drives my happiness is being able to help other people find their happiness. So have kind of dived in full steam ahead to studying happiness, learning about happiness, and then coaching happiness. And I've got a book coming out in a couple months here called The Happiness Recipe. It's really like a guidebook to living a happier life right now.
So how would you define happiness then? Because I know different people say, like, money can't buy you happiness and different things like that. So what would you say is happiness to you?
So, I mean, happiness, right, is not just about feeling good all the time. I like to talk about joy. And I believe that in order to have joy, you have to be in a place where you can navigate all of the feelings that are going to come your way. So it's not just about focusing always on the good, focusing always on the up, focusing always on the positive, but it's growing the skill set and tools to navigate the challenges that life is going to throw at us. And then really living, so I say the formula for maximum happiness is simple. Do more of what matters to you and less of the rest. So really filling your life with things that bring you and those around you joy. Filling your life with things that are in alignment with what you believe your purpose to be, not your purpose, your sort of overarching purpose in life, but your purpose in the season that you're in. And that's another big concept that I talk about, is that we sort of go through seasons in our lives, and our priorities and our purpose and our recipe for happiness might change as we navigate those seasons.
Yeah. I definitely think that the things that made me happy in college probably aren't the same things that make me happy now.
Amen. Yep.
But when I think about happiness, I think about purpose, and I think you've hit on that. You're prioritizing the things that give you purpose or that make you feel like it's important to you at the time. And there's a saying that say, your treasure's where your heart is, or something to that effect. Yep. And I think that's kind of where you're hitting about priority. So how important is time management when it comes to pursuing happiness?
I think it's hugely important, right? I mean, my journey to happiness, or to find my own happiness, really started from a productivity perspective, right? I was working in big companies. At the time, I had a young child, and my husband had a super demanding career in the intelligence industry. And so, yeah, time management was where my focus on all of this started. And what I learned is absolutely time management is a tool to help us manage living in a more purpose driven way or a more priority aligned way. But there's a lot of work that needs to happen before you can dig into just how to manage your time.
And what is some of that work that we need to focus on first?
So the way that I look at it is there's sort of, I call them gaps, three gaps that get between us and sort of living that happiness formula or that happiness recipe that I said of doing more of what matters to you and less of the rest. And the first gap I call the authenticity gap. And it's when we really don't take the time to get clear on what actually matters to us. We are sent message over after message after message across the course of our lives around what should make us happy, right? It's in the media, it comes from our families, it comes from our friends, it comes from our schools, that these are the measures of success, and when you achieve them, you should feel happy. And often we don't stop and take the time to really connect where our joy comes from. And so that's the first step, is really getting clear on
Mm.
what it is that matters to you and then being able to claim that. Um, I'm going to skip the second gap for a second and
Mhm.
say we're an action driven society. So the other gap I see is people know what they need. They've closed that authenticity gap, but they have what I call a physical energy gap. And that's what you're talking about in terms of time management, right? They're clear on what matters most to them, but they cannot figure out how to match their energy, expenditure of energy, resources, and time to that. And so it's closing that physical energy gap, which is a productivity activity.
Mhm.
The middle gap that I didn't talk about yet is the one that gets missed sometimes because we are action driven. We don't stop to consider whether we have the mindset, the beliefs, and the feelings that'll support us taking that physical action to do more of what matters to us and less of the rest. Are we going to be able to say no? Are we going to be able to let go of guilt? Are we going to be able to really claim what matters to us? And so, how do you build the foundational beliefs and feelings that support that? And I call that the emotional energy gap. So, I work with people kind of to identify where their gaps are and then help them close those gaps in really practical ways for the way that they're living today. Not like someday I will have, but today, how can I live a happier, more priority aligned, more balanced, more enjoyable life?
Mhm. Yeah, I definitely see that with, people that I've managed before that feel like they have, their priorities right or what's going to make them happy, and that energy, whether it be emotional energy or physical energy, it seems to be the things that get people caught up a lot on is energy. Is once they do figure out the first part,
Yep.
how do we solve those, the emotional energy and the physical energy gaps that exist?
Well, I mean that's a big question. But I mean, I think there's a couple of practical ways. I mean, when you talk about solving the emotional energy gap, I think it's first getting clear on the things that can be barriers.
Mhm.
Couple big examples I've already mentioned, right? Are you going to be able to say no? Are you going to be able to let go of guilt? Another big one, frankly, John, is without getting too deep into neuroscience, is the way that our nervous system really tries to keep us safe. And for it, safe means not happy or unhappy, just safe means known, right? So
Mhm.
it really tries to keep us from taking too many risks by changing. And so there's a lot
Mhm.
that I do with clients around recognizing the role that the nervous system plays in keeping you stuck. When you want to move forward, when you see where you want to go and you just can't quite get there, often there's a couple nervous system hacks that we can play with that help unlock that. So that's the emotional energy piece, and then the physical energy piece. I mean, that can get really tactical, right? How are you using your time versus
Mhm.
how do you want to be, or what Let's do like a weighting exercise. Let's look at a week of your calendar and say, okay, you've told me that your top priority is X. How much time did you spend on that this week? And often just measuring activities like that can be really illuminating and can drive behavior change. And then there's all kinds of things you can do around building new habits, and so the list goes on. But that's where you get into tactical productivity hacks.
Yeah, yeah, and I've talked about some of those before. I know I teach part time at Winthrop University, and one of the things I do with my students is every semester is we do a time log where we log our
Mhm.
time for a week, just kind of to show people where their time is going. And I think that's a good method to start out with when it comes to physical energy. Getting your time lined up is to actually take an inventory of see where you've been or what you're doing.
Yes.
When it comes to emotional energy, I can definitely relate to a lot of that because as a new boss or new leader, I've had the times in the past where I needed to talk to an individual and I needed to confront them about something, but and I knew that's what I needed to do, but I just couldn't get over the fact that I was afraid to do it.
Yes.
That fear factor that we talk about. What are some things that we can do to help us when, whether it be, having that difficult conversation or trying a new activity that we think we might fail at? What is something that we can do to help overcome some of those fears that are blocking us from getting to that happy place?
So I think, a lot of those fears boil down to a fear of failure or a fear that we aren't good enough, fundamentally
Hmm.
good enough, right? Like that we don't have the chops to handle this situation, that it's going to go off the rails and that it's going to have all these bad consequences. So I think the first thing to do is to recognize that approximately, this is not scientific, but this is just based on my own observation with clients and peers and the like. Approximately 99.5% of people are walking through their days believing in some aspect that they are not good enough. And so if you can sort of acknowledge that and look at the people that you really admire, look at the leaders who you think would have no problem taking on this new challenge, be it that difficult conversation or the new project, and know that they also would have fear, that takes a little bit of the fear's power away, right?
Hmm.
Because you
Yeah.
can look at them and say, well, I think they're amazing. So we can't all be right that we're all not good enough. We must all be wrong. So start there. The second thing is to build what I like to call a success stack. So you take it could be a 5-minute activity, it could be a 5 minutes a day activity, depending on how deep you want to go with it, but really write down or start to create a file of all the things that have gone well, right? When you've taken a leap, when you've taken a risk, when you've taken on a new project, when you've had a difficult conversation and it's gone well, document it for yourself so that in those moments of doubt, you can look back and say, well, geez, I've done all this stuff and it's actually turned out okay. I'm going to try this one too. And maybe it won't turn out okay, but that's not going to override the 25, 30, 50, 150 over time successes that I've had, right?
Right. Is that because like our neuroscience, our brain tries to, like you said, keep us safe? Is it reminding us of the things that failed? Is that why those keep coming to mind to try to protect us? Or is that something I'm just making up?
No, I mean, I think that's part of it, right? At the end of the day, your nervous system really truly wants you to keep doing the same things because to the extent that you are currently safe, right?
Hmm.
If it's safe where you're sitting right now today, then your nervous system would prefer you not introduce any new variables because it
Yeah.
doesn't know how it will need to respond to those, right? It could be threat, it could not be threat. And then, there could be things from the past that make it seem threatening. I mean, you can get pretty deep into sort of attachment patterns and neuroscience and kind of unwind some of that stuff. But yeah, that is absolutely a part of it. That is where that is what fear of failure truly is fear that
Mhm.
if I do something different, it will be bad, right?
Yeah. I know, like for me, take this back to like being in the office and trying to manage a team and leading and stuff. Is that if I don't document all my successes when it comes down to the end of the year, I can't remember them. I only remember the
100.
failures. I'm
Yep.
only focusing on the projects that didn't go very well, or were over budget or behind schedule. Yeah, if I do document it, I can always I do this every year. I have a spreadsheet where I go through and list
Yep.
all the things we've done, the potential savings, the projects that were under budget, and I can go back and look at them. And it's always a longer list than the failures, but I never remember them. And I think that's a good thing that you're talking about is to document that. And I should take it a step further and document those difficult conversations, those one-on-ones that had great outcomes that I never remember about, so that I can be more likely to take those risks and do more of those things.
Exactly. And you want to make sure you're documenting not just, I mean, what you describe is absolutely important for managing your performance, right? But you
Mhm.
want to go kind of outside the edges of that and document the times where you took a step outside your comfort zone and it went well.
Mhm.
And not all of those are going to be sort of measurable metrics for performance, just like you said. And the other, another way that I've seen it done, and I'm sure you've, heard either from prior guests or generally about, having a gratitude practice, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I like to marry that with having a brag practice.
Mm.
And so it's wonderful to sit in gratitude and be grateful for the things in our lives, but we often forget to celebrate our little daily wins. And so if you've got already a daily gratitude practice where you're spending time at some point in your day kind of reflecting on what's gone well and what you're grateful for, add to that a little moment where you talk about what you did well. Because we don't do that. We are not trained to do that. We are trained to mitigate risk and go on to the next thing without fully celebrating the wonderful things that we're doing every single day.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I've had AJ Jacobs on. We talked about his book, "Thanks a Thousand," where
Mhm.
he tries to thank everybody that was involved in making his cup of coffee. And one of the things he talked about was the fact that we should have those practices at the end of the day where we, are list some of the things we're thankful for. And it makes total sense to do the same thing about things that you're, proud about, that you want to brag about, that you've done well for that day, because it is so easy to forget about your successes and only focus on the failures.
We are just not real good at it. I mean, I don't know. There are some people who are better at it than others, but I mean, we just don't spend it does not get the airtime it deserves. And that's all
Right.
I'll say. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. So, how can we as leaders and managers maybe help our team kind of learn some of these habits, or how can we incorporate them in our daily practices to make sure we are leading a happier and more successful group? Because I think one of the things that I hear a lot of people talk about is happy coworkers, are more productive. They get more stuff done, right? And if you can be a leader over a happy group, you'll probably be a more successful leader in general.
I think that's right. And I think it can be challenging because I think it requires introducing a note of humanity into the workplace that isn't always there, but should be, right? It
Mhm.
requires being able to understand, and this is not revolutionary. What I'm about to say is not my idea, and I'm not claiming it, but it requires understanding your team's happiness drivers. What is
Mhm.
it that really makes them tick? What is it that's most important to them right now? What challenges are they facing? Where are they confronting those fear walls that you can help encourage them to go up and over, right?
Mhm.
Um, but that requires talking about feelings. That requires being open to hearing things you might not want to hear. And as a leader, sometimes we shy away from that, particularly new leaders struggle with um, that element of it if it's not something that they're already really comfortable with or that they haven't already cultivated.
Yeah, I think that's something that I struggled with at first, and I try to make it a point now when I'm doing one-on-one with someone is to talk about and ask them questions about things that are outside of work. Like, tell me about your family. Tell me about, your new house if you moved, or tell me about
Mhm.
what's going on with your car if you're a car guy, or whatever it is that they like. They like dogs or, playing video games or VR or whatever it is. Let's talk about that. Let's focus on that, and let's hear more about the things that aren't work related. And I don't want my teams coming in to a one-on-one and talking about projects. We've got
Yep.
meetings to talk about projects. We've got meetings to talk about work. I want to hear a one-on-one is about you, not about the task that you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, and what if you opened your one-on-one with a question like, "What's the biggest challenge you're facing right now?"
That's good.
And then left it open to them whether they wanna talk about a work challenge, a life challenge, or both.
Hmm.
Because then you're meeting them where they are too, right? Because not everybody's gonna wanna come in and say, "Oh my gosh, my biggest challenge is that, you know, home life is a wreck right now because I'm juggling so much." But some
Right.
people will want to say that, and some people will want to ask for your support as a leader in navigating that. And so open the door, and you open the door with curiosity, full stop. That is the quickest, easiest way to open a door. Get
Mhm.
curious.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I think curiosity is one of those skills that isn't cultivated enough in the education system, in my opinion. I think we need to focus more on being curious and exploring things that haven't been explored before, and asking those questions that may be a little uncomfortable at the time, but are
Yep.
important to open the conversation.
And for the most part, frankly, we are not rewarded for curiosity. We're rewarded for having the answer.
Right.
And so curiosity is not a muscle that we practice, but it is a solution for many, many, many problems, both in the
Mhm.
workplace and in life.
Yeah, I think it's more important to have the best questions than to have the best answers.
I like that. Yeah, me too.
So, right now we're in the middle of this pandemic and hopefully coming close to the end, but I don't know if that's the case or not with all the new strains popping up. And I've seen a lot in the news about people being unhappy and depression being up and abuse being up and all this kind of negativity. Are you seeing the same kind of thing? And what do you think people should do during something like this to try to help those around them to find a way to cope and be more happy?
Yeah, so I want to distinguish really before we even start that conversation
Hmm.
between the happiness kind of stuff that I'm talking about and what is a real mental health issue like depression, right?
Gotcha.
There is no system, there's nothing in my book, there's no coaching I'm going to provide that is going to be a mental health solution on its own. If you have a mental health challenge, you need mental health support. And I say that with all the love and no judgment, right?
Right.
So I just want to distinguish that piece. But I will say this: I think we have gone through what I call a global reprioritization.
Mm.
Right? Everything has shifted in the last year, and so we're all left kind of. Some of us are still operating like we were operating in the last season and are feeling the tension that not adjusting to the realities of this global pandemic season is creating, right? Our goals haven't changed. Our expectations of ourselves and others haven't shifted. And that sets us up to be unhappy because we are not appreciating the reality of our situation. And even those of us who have appreciated that reality are still feeling a little lost, right?
Hmm.
Most of us are operating in a world where we prefer to have a plan. How can you plan when you don't know what's next? Because
Hmm.
that's the world we're living in right now, right? And
Right.
so it's been
Exactly.
this force to be in the present. And often we're not comfortable with the present because we haven't done the work to figure out how to be happy in the moment as opposed to happy when we have the title, the car, the job, the money, the number on the scale, whatever the thing is that we're striving for, right?
Mhm.
So that's where to me that authenticity gap kind of rears its ugly head because often we've only done the surface work of thinking about where our happiness comes from, not the deep work of truly understanding what brings us joy in the present. So that's one step is really, I would say, stop and think about what makes you joyful. And then whatever that surface answer is, ask some more questions, get curious about it. I'll give you just a sort of simple example. If somebody said, what makes me joyful is world travel, right? Well, that's a
Mhm.
hard thing to have be your source of joy in the middle of a global pandemic.
Yeah, for sure.
So I would say, well, what is it about world travel that brings you joy? Well, I like seeing new things and meeting new people. Okay. What else is it? Well, I also like all the research that goes into planning a trip is really, really fun for me. I love to learn about it. I love to talk to all my friends who've been to those places. Well, you know what? Even just with those two questions, we've unlocked some things that we could look at. How can we have that today? Right?
Mhm.
Could you plan the best trip ever for when travel is possible again? Or could you find ways to do international global meetups with people on Zoom so that you're meeting new people and learning new things? Whatever that driver of your joy is, how do you incorporate that? And you might have to get creative about it, but that only happens if you understand where it's coming from. And again, that's a super simple example, but I hope it's helpful.
It's very helpful, and I agree 100%. And I found that I love to travel as well. I think it's great to take trips, whether it be work trips or personal trips. I just like the fact that you're seeing something new, you get to explore something new. And for anybody that has that same thing and is really kind of bummed out that they can't take those trips right now, one of the things that I started doing is planning like what's going to be our next Disney trip with our kids.
Hmm.
What's that going to be like whenever we can go, whenever we feel comfortable to go. I know they're open, but whenever
Yeah.
we feel comfortable of going and making that happen. And then also, I have to just do a little sidebar here. Sorry if I get off on a tangent, but I got an Oculus Quest 2 for Christmas, which is a
Okay.
VR headset.
Yep.
And there are so many like free VR exploratory videos where we can go and visit museums in virtual reality. And it's definitely not the same, but you do get to learn that new kind of aspect and see some of those things to where it feels like you're really there. And I would definitely encourage anybody that has the means right now and loves to travel but can't do it to check that out, because that has kind of scratched my little itch for a while is being able to go out and do that and still have that same experience.
But that's a great example, right? Because it allows you to find a little bit of joy in the moment, even
Hmm.
though it's not exactly how you'd want it to look, right?
Hmm.
And being open to that, I think is huge. And, I've done this work with clients and we've gotten down to like the nitty-gritty of, well, what I really like about vacation is I don't have to cook. Well, geez, could we solve that problem?
Yeah.
Could you, order in more often, or could you, get a delivery box, whatever the answer is that works for your financial situation? Like there are options out there, but you have to distill it down to its true essence, like
Hmm.
what is the small part of that that brings you joy?
Hmm. Yeah, I think focusing on that, and also for me, I know during this pandemic, a lot of people, the change has really messed up a lot of people as far as what they think about. But for me, it's been, yeah, we're at home with our kids, and I've heard people complain about, oh, I have to do e-learning. You know what? Being at home with the kids is kind of nice because we can take walks during the middle of the day.
Mhm.
We have a lot more time together, even though we are doing e-learning, and that does kind of suck. And I feel like the kids kind of are getting the short end of the stick sometimes with that, but it's still, there's so many positives that you can look at. And I think just doing what you talked about with that bragging, time at the end of the day, and just thinking about like, before, this happened, I didn't get to take walks with my kids every day. Now I get
Yep.
to, and that's one of those things I get to talk about, and kind of kudos to me. Yeah, I took a walk with the kids and it was fun. And we went outside and we explored, we went to the woods or something like that. And being able to document that and just think about it is really an important part of looking back and seeing your successes.
Yeah, I mean, and you hit on something, and that's why gratitude practices matter, and that's why putting brag with it is even better. At the end of the day, where your focus grows. Where your focus grows, right? So if you're spending your time looking at the silver linings, you're going to see more silver linings. If you're spending your time looking at the challenges, you're going to see more challenges. That is not to say that you ignore the reality of challenge or you ignore the reality of silver lining, but just you have a choice on where you want to put your eyes when you have a moment. Put them somewhere that you want to grow.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to focus on, where you want to grow and where you want to go forward in the moment. And I think that's an important thing that people aren't really thinking about. They're just trying to get by right now.
And I mean, there's no question are you sick of hearing the word unprecedented yet? But like these are
Yeah.
unprecedented times. There is no roadmap for this. And there is, and like I said, the even more challenging thing is there is no end date. There is no, clear articulation of what the quote unquote after times are going to look like. And so we're all in the midst of this deep uncertainty. And it's hard. It's hard to live that way, particularly if we are programmed to plan,
Mhm.
which most of us are.
So you mentioned that you had a new book coming out. Tell us a little bit about that and why you decided to put this down on paper.
So the book is actually my reaction to the fact that we were launched into a global pandemic right as I was truly about to go on sort of a networking speaking tour for my coaching business. And
Oh
so
no.
it's, hey, but you know what? I said, here's the deal. I have this framework. I want to document it. So I'm going to write it down. And that turned into this book, which will be out in April, called The Happiness Recipe, A Powerful Guide to Living What Matters. And it really is um, a framework that I think people can use to self-coach through a lot of the things that we've talked about today and more. I wanted it to be very actionable. So it's really an action guide approach to mapping out your happiness recipe for the season that you're in right now. And then you have all these tools that you can use as your seasons change and evolve.
Do you have a release date for it yet, or?
The tentative release date is April 6th. It should be in
Mhm.
pre-sale in March. That might shift by a week or so, but I think that it'll be in April for sure.
So what has the process been like? Has it been challenging? Has it been difficult working with, revisions and things like that?
It's been a blast. I've had the most fun,
Yeah.
actually. I really enjoyed writing the book because it was like the culmination of both my career to this point, which is really sort of part of where all where this framework came from, and then my client work as well. And so it was just a lot of fun documenting it. A lot goes into making a book happen, but I really believe that these tools are incredibly practical and incredibly useful. So it's been fun to be able to bring it into the world.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, how can people find out more about the things that you're doing, your coaching practice, and find out how to sign up or pick up the book?
So the best place to find me is on my website, which I'm assuming you can include in show notes too, but it's www.grantley, GRANTLEY, coaching, that's all one word, .com, /podcast. I have a special page for podcast listeners that has kind of an overview, and you can get on the list to be notified when the book comes out. And there's a couple other goodies in there too.
All right. Yeah, I'll definitely link that up in the show notes, and be sure that gets put out to everybody. And I really appreciate having you on. Is there anything that I missed that I really should have hit on that the audience needs to hear about?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I could talk about living happy for forever, but I think we've covered the big stuff for today.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate having you on, Becky. Thank you so much. And we'll link up your website to the podcast page in the show notes so people can find that. And again, thanks so much.
Thanks a lot, John.
If you enjoyed that episode, please leave a rating and review in Apple Podcasts. I'd greatly appreciate that. And also, don't forget to check out merch. We have some t-shirts that I've designed that are on at geekleader.com. You can click on the merchandise section there and check that out. And also, don't forget about the books from our guests. So if you like this guest and other guests that have written books, please go ahead and check that out at geekleader.com. I would greatly appreciate it, and I'm sure they would too.